Namaskaram and hello. I'm Arjun, or you can call me Justin. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. That is giving praise to Lord Ganesha. I'm not trying to push this on you. It's more just he is the Lord of beginnings and remover of obstacles and wisdom. And every time we begin something, we try to give praise and invoke him as Hindus. So I'm just going to be saying that. You don't have to say it with me. You can if you want, but it's Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. So before every video, when I'm starting every video, I'm going to try to, just give praise, invoke him, so then I can maybe do a good job. So also, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, notification bell, share it, comment. I'm trying to get this out to many people as I can, hoping that it resonates and motivates or, helps people. I feel it's not going to really resonate with everybody, but hopefully a few. So the bigger the channel gets, the more likely that is to happen. And yes, of course, just like any other person that has a channel or a podcast, you get some financial benefits, incentives there too, the bigger it gets. So with that out of the way, I have indicated how I want to talk about, Ayurveda, which is the traditional medicine healthcare model for Hindus, or Sanatana Dharma, which is known as the eternal way or everlasting way. And people have to remember that Hinduism isn't a religion, it's a cultural ethos, and that means that it incorporates mathematics, architecture, engineering, all the other sciences, the arts, music, and it's connected by the spirituality component or element. And you got to give credit where credit is due, because this is the longest lasting, oldest, most intact culture, civilization that we know about. Some Western scholars and academics will try to poo-poo that. Not a surprise. But I'm not here today to talk about that. I'm just trying to give credit where credit is due. And while I do think there are a lot of useful things within modern Western science and healthcare, I do feel like it misses a step or two or three. And, Ayurveda has those missing steps and pieces that can fill in. And so going forward, I've always talked about when I get this better set up, I'm still working on it. Like I said, folks, I got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of irons in the fire. And I'm just waiting for certain things to be able to strike, and the channel is one of them. So I just got to work on exactly how the setup's going to go, what kind of visuals I'm going to do, cause you have to remember that sometimes you need software for that or certain apps, and then how much time you're going to have to commit to that, all this stuff. And until I get somebody that does all the editing for me, it's all me. I'm a one-man show, and with all the things that I'm doing, I'm constantly busy. So yeah, just give me a little bit of time. But especially when I talk about things within healthcare, biology, the sciences, psychology, and especially when I'm talking about more traditional models like Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine, I'd like to have some visuals and graphics and all that to better explain. I'm a very visual person. That's how I do a lot of learning. That I'm also a kinetic learner, so I have to actually do it myself. So yeah, when I get there, and some of this stuff is it's really detailed. And for Westerners, I think that it's maybe going to be hard to follow at times, especially because some of the names or terms are in Sanskrit. So, you want to make sure that we get the right spelling in English, and then explain what it is. So I do feel that in this day and age, we live in one of the hardest ages to live in. And in the Hindu Vedic system, there's kind of a cycle of time, and we go through 4 different periods, and we actually go through each one twice to make a complete circle. And we live in the hardest one. And while we may be advanced in some ways, like with technology, we are very spiritually blind, deaf, and dumb. Some people might think that they're very religious and spiritual, and that may be true. Like, I feel like I'm a very religious, spiritual person, but I'm also like a Hindu toddler. My knowledge of Sanatana Dharma and the Vedas and all that is very limited. And even with the stuff that I do every day, I probably am making mistakes, quite a few, sorry. And, so, but it's more of like, we don't have the spiritual vision and intellect, ears and senses, the spiritual senses, to really be apt students and practitioners. We may feel an inclination to be very spiritual and religious, but our understanding and reception, receiving, that information and processing it and truly understanding it and then executing it, we're very limited in this day and age. And there are very few people who, like they're the gurus or the swamis. There are some charlatans out there in any religion. But there are some that are out there that are truly, these gifted individuals. They kind of surpass the rest of us. And that might just be the trajectory of, where their soul is at. And, it's not that they're better than us necessarily. They're just kind of further along the path. But for most of us, the best that we can do is just try to be devoted. But circling back to what I'm hoping to do is, I feel in the Western model of medicine, biology, psychology, we're missing some steps. We are not taking into account the spiritual health, because the spiritual essence pervades everything, in my belief. At least I know some of you may be agnostic or atheist. That's your choice. But I hope that everybody can agree that there's something bigger than us, as individuals, that something that maybe we can't really explain or detect with our scientific tools. But even within Ayurveda, we have like our nature, and there's 3 types of like trigunas, and then there's tridoshas, which are kind of like our constitution, and that can affect our body and our mind, and we might have to do things like change our diets, do different kinds of exercise and different kinds of yoga, different kinds of spiritual practices. You can see that with people that are naturally like obese or very skinny and underweight. People that have very hyperactive minds, or sluggish, or very emotional, or are very logical with very little emotion. And then you can kind of see what maybe needs to be adjusted. But then there are things like the pancha koshas, which are like the 5 sheaths that cover our Atman, our soul, our spark. And all of those are different and interact with the Atman and everything else around us differently. And then we have things like chakras and nadis. And most people know like the chakras, like there are 7 main ones, but there are more than that start from your tailbone and go all the way up to the crown. And each one has different associations with, what problems are often associated with it, if it's too active or hyperactive or hypoactive, so underactive. And different things that affect that, whether it's like certain kinds of material or foods, your thought and emotional processes and what you put out there, how you act and behave. And then nadis, there are like tens of thousands. I think like it's over 72 or something like that, 72,000. And then there's marmas, points, which are kind of like these junctions, meridian junctions throughout the body. And there's so many of those. That's often used in acupuncture. And that's where like the prana, or the spiritual like life force, enters and leaves our bodies. Same thing with the chakras. And so there are all these things, and that's just a very generalized summary. Okay. And I am not an Ayurvedic doctor or practitioner. It's something that I'm just very interested in, and hopefully one day I can go to India and do some training and become one, because I think it will be a better, for me at least, a better approach to treating patients. And but it's the missing element, the missing link, in our healthcare and well-being interventions and approaches. So, but then you have things too, like within Sanatana Dharma, or being Hindu, we believe in karma, which most people, see as like what goes around comes around, man. But we also believe in past lives, and that we live many lifetimes, like thousands, if not millions. And karma is our action, and then there's karma pal, which is some say fall, I guess, but it's action and then reaction, or labor and fruits of the labor, right? Doing and result. And so we have to, it can be good, bad, weird, ugly, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's just the action, and then the reaction that happens out of that action, what comes out of it, the result. And living through many lifetimes, we have to consider that. So personally, the way I would approach it, here's like a one good example, is that if you're dealing with somebody that has severe addictions, like substance addictions, alcoholism, or if they use heroin or ecstasy, things like that, right? Illicit, illegal substances that have the addictive quality or propensity to end up into an addiction. When you are dealing with someone that really struggles with it, I mean, really, really, really struggles with an addiction, and it can be non-substances too, don't get me wrong, but that is usually a sign that it's not just this lifetime that this person has struggled with that, and it's not just their heredity, their family makeup, if other individuals in their family have struggled with addictions. All those are important to know, like if there are certain genetics that might make them predisposed to having a certain kind of health problem. Don't get me wrong, that's all very important to take in consideration. You must. But as a Hindu, I would see that as this person was, whether or not their family, there's biology at play, heredity at play, like that does matter. But if they're born into a family that has other individuals have the same problem or similar problems, it's like, well, maybe like their karma in the past was struggling with those urges and those desires and those addictions, has led them now into a lifetime where like it's going to be a little harder now to move past these addictions, because it's like, in previous life maybe it didn't work, and then it gets a little harder and harder and harder. And it's like you got to hit rock bottom sometimes with your problems before you can start making progress again. Because in other, maybe previous lifetimes, you didn't take the opportunities to move away from those addictions or those kinds of problems. And now the result is like you're just like hitting rock bottom. Some people are going to be like triggered by what I'm saying. I don't know what to tell you. That is a resiliency thing. It is a tolerance issue. And that's something that you should be focusing on probably first and foremost. Or I would just say I strongly encourage you to really focus on that, because it's going to be hard for you to get better in any way until you build up that resiliency and that tolerance, and be just open, right? Don't get triggered by, the littlest things that somebody says. That is not going to help you move forward. I'm not sorry. That's the reality. All right. I do care about you. I do want you to get better. But if you're triggered by this, then I'm not the healthcare provider for you or the person to be listening to on a channel like this. I'm really not. And I wish you the best. Okay. But for those of you who are still listening and who are allowing yourself to listen, read between the lines, right, and let the message really resonate down to your core, I'm glad you're still around. I'm glad you're still listening. But this might be your opportunity, even if it's not like rock bottom, but things are very not good for you, they're not going well for you. You're that stage or that kind of lifetime that you're in. See this as an opportunity to start changing that trajectory, because knowing that it could get harder for you in this lifetime or the next lifetime, hopefully will deter you from keeping going down this path, right? This downward spiral. But getting back to, like, there might be a reason. And even if they weren't born into a family where there's addictions, it's like, well, now you're born into a family that might not be able to understand what you're going through. But on the flip side, maybe they'll be supportive and really, try to help you through it, and they won't be tempting you, right? You won't be associating with yourself almost kind of not forced, but you're kind of stuck with people that have the same problem and they're not really helping each other out get better. So whatever the case is, you might need to look, as a practitioner, you might need to think about that. And why I'm saying this is because karma is your action, and then that creates like samskaras and vasanas, which are like imprinting, and then that turns into kind of like a behavioral pattern, where there's also vrittis too, which is like kind of like conditioning. So the more you do something, or if it's very intense action, it leaves an imprint, and the more you do it, or the more intense it gets, then that becomes kind of like part of like a reaction that you create out of that. Like you're operating now off of that imprinting, and then that becomes like conditioning of your spiritual intellect, right? And then that passes on to your next lifetime. I know some people are going to be like, oh, he's a quack, he's talking about all this wooey stuff and hippy dippy stuff. And it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not the provider for you either, but I'm hoping that you can agree that the spiritual component in our healthcare system and our model of well-being is missing, especially in countries like America. And it is, if you, whether you view yourself as religious, spiritual, or agnostic or atheist, I think everybody can agree that there are some missing steps within our model of healthcare and well-being. And maybe what I'm saying has some validity to it, has some truth to it, right? So when I'm working with patients and clients now, I really try to, and just anybody, like, socially, out and about, I'm really trying to assess and understand why they might have certain kinds of problems, whether it's physically, psychologically, or spiritually. And I especially when it's a new patient client or someone that I don't really know well, it's going to be really hard for me to figure out what that is. And it's not like by practicing Ayurveda, I'll know, someone's like all their past lives and what led them to this lifetime and this condition. I'm not saying that, but it's something where if they have a tendency to have problems with addictions or be very anxious about a lot of things or be very cold and analytical and emotionless, or hyperactive, whatever the case may be psychologically, or if they've seemed to always be like underweight, or overweight, or just fluctuates, that helps me understand, okay, maybe, there's probably like a biological component or a psychological component to all this, but the root cause might be something that is more like spiritually based. And I don't even want to say spiritually based, but something that is more based off of biology, psychology, and spirituality, right? Rather than looking at them separately, it might be something that is, what's at the core. So that could be something that, what is their natural like state or nature or constitutional position, mind and body, if they have certain kinds of behavioral patterns and mindsets, they probably have been doing certain kinds of karma that's just like digging them deeper into this hole, and then that helps you. It's kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy, where it tries to trace back like what originally set this chain reaction off of, an impression that you got or the feelings that it caused, and then that causes you to react a certain way, and the more that it happens, it becomes tendencies and just a ingrained, behavioral and behavioral pattern or mindset, right? And it's very similar to that, where you're trying to understand, okay, how do we work our way back so then we can kind of undo all this conditioning, this emotional, psychological, behavioral conditioning, and then put healthier ones in place. So that's really like what I wanted to touch on today, is what I'll be talking about. Not all the time, but when I talk about healthcare stuff, I'm going to try to incorporate more of that and talk more about that and just slowly introduce it. There's just so much information out there, and a lot of terms or words are in Sanskrit. And I want to have good visuals, because I'm a visual learner and also a kinetic learner. Like I have to do it like with my hands, or perform the action in order to really learn it and have it sink in. So, but I just want to introduce that, talk a little bit more about it. And then, we'll hopefully it will, at least, be interesting for some of you, intriguing. And then hopefully it will also maybe help some of you and maybe take a different approach to your own health. Okay. But as always, I thank you for listening, watching this video, and I wish you all the best on your journeys. I really, truly do want all of you to have true joy, which is being able to handle the ups and the downs equally. All right. And being like having that self-love and that self-respect. And I wish you all true healing and stability. All right. I truly do. I will talk to you next time. Take care till then.